Welcome back to Python with Andrew. And I'm doing a couple of videos on testing and test plans using Python. And I did a video just with a basic test plan where I built it from scratch to show you what needs to be done. I use a simple function. So if you haven't seen that, I recommend going back and have a look at that. What I want to do is take it a step further this time, because basically I'm lazy. So I'm going to get some help to do this and help me do my testing. Because let's face it, testing is probably not the most exciting part of programming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a Python module that helps us test called unittest. That's good. It's a rigorous way of testing. And I'm not going to explain too much about unit test at the moment, but just I'm going to focus on this helps me and how it can help me do my testing. And then because I said I'm lazy, I'm actually going to use Chat-GPT to write my unit test functions. And I've got the link within Visual Studio Code, but I'll probably also jump over to the website version just so you can see it a bit easier. And again, I think it's a great use of Chat-GPT to generate functions like testing functions, because as I mentioned, great time saver for me. And it tells me that I'm going to get more of the cases done. Now, there are some downsides to using it, and that's I will mention that towards the end. So let's jump over. And first of all, I'm going to go to what I wrote initially as my design or my pseudocode in a Word document. And then I wrote my test plan out. Now, the function I'm doing is a simple one that converts a student score to a grade like pass, fail, credit. And I've only done 3 rules in there. And I've said the score's got to be between 0 and 100. And if it's not, then we should have a fail. So I created a number of test inputs and what I expect the outputs to be. And in the last video, I showed you, let's code some of those and let's run it and see how we go. So now if I go to Visual Studio Code, that's my function there, convert score, pretty simple, just a lot of if conditions. If it's outside the range, an error, otherwise it follows those rules and just passes back an answer. I then created my own test function to say print yes if my test was correct, no if it wasn't. Then I did all these tests, 55, 49, 50, -1. Really, I should have done all the ones that I did in my Word document here, but I was just showing you the example. So I did that. And if I run the program, then I think it all works fine. Let me just move that out of the way and run the program. I get lots of yeses. That's great. So that was what I showed last time. As I mentioned, I built that all myself. I'm going to delete all that because I'm going to use the unit test module from Python. And the unit test module does a number of things. It allows you to set up a number of functions that allow you to test certain conditions in your program. And it does it in a way that you can then run your test module, which will test your program or test your function and give you some results. Hopefully, the results are just all good. So it's set up to do that. It's got a few other features associated with it. I'm not going to focus too much on that, other than it sets it up and gives me a testing plan, not unlike what I did there, that I can then use over and over and over again as a good testing strategy. The downside, of course, it takes a while to build, and I want help. So I'm going to jump over to Chat-GPT, and I'm going to say, create a unit test function to test this particular function. Okay, so if I go over, and I've actually already done it, so I'm going to show you what I did. I ask the question, create a unit test function for the following functions. The function, that's my function there. And it imported the module, sets up a class, and then defines all these small little functions, and then it will run the unit test.main, which in turn runs all those programs. Okay, and so I'm just going to copy this code over, go back to my I'm going to put it down here. And you can see now I've got my function and now I've got my unit test class. The way unit test works is you tend to write functions that say test, what are you testing? Test, what are you testing? And then use the assert equals function, or method, I should say, to see whether or not it gives you what you want. Error, error, fail, fail, pass, pass. Now, if you look through here, it's pretty well done a good job at generating the functions that I wanted. It tests -1, tests 101, so it tests outside the bounds. It tests 0 and it tests 50, which are inside the fail and also the pass bounds. It tests 64 and 65, and then it also tests 75. It doesn't really need to test that one, but it did. Okay, so it's done a pretty good job matching what I set out to do when I had my Word document. If anything, it said to me, hey, you don't need a couple of the ones you've got. So like the 55 and the 51, I don't need those. And it's perfectly correct. So it's done a good job in saying, you know, here's a test case or test cases for your function. If I run it, sorry, let me just, if I save it and then run it, it just says it ran 7 tests in 0 seconds. And the dots mean they work. Everything was okay, not a problem in the world. So that's really good. No surprise that these test cases should work because Chat-GPT has worked out what the answer should be by looking at the code and giving me that. If, on the other hand, if I change one of these, let's say 50, and I said, what happens if it returns credit, right? Which would tell me that the program is wrong, right? Because we're saying convert score 50 should equal credit, not pass, but credit, right? That's what we're saying our logic suggests, right? And we're hoping that the result tells us there's a fail, okay? It tells us there's a fail, tells us where it is. So it's run 7 tests and 1 failed, okay? So that's really good. So if I had done this on my own and put that in there as my test case, that would tell me my program was wrong, which of course it's not. I've done it the other way around, but it would tell me the program's wrong. So let me put this back to pass. Okay, and if I clean that up, it should go back to being run 7 tests. Okay, so that's a really nice way of getting test functions to help test your program. As I mentioned, because I'm lazy, this is a perfect use of Chat-GPT. I like that. And if I was going to use my, if I go into highlight this code here, I could have right-clicked and used unit test code GPT. All right, so I installed code GPT on my Visual Studio Code, so I could have actually used that and it would generate probably something similar. So let's try it. Right, you can see that it's generated code, right, and different numbers, but the same sort of deal there, right? So, sorry, down the bottom here, different numbers here, right? It's got the errors, it's got the passes, the credits, etc. Okay, and I would just copy that across. So whether I'm using it inside my Visual Studio Code, because I've installed Code-GPT, which I like, or I run it in the web browser because it was bigger and easier for us to see, I get the same impact. So one of the big benefits of doing this sort of mechanism, it saves a lot of time. You highlight a function and you ask Chat-GPT, and I'm assuming all the other generative AI tools, ask it to create your unit test function, and it comes up with this here. We just plug it in, and then we have a good set of functions. So it saves a lot of time, incredible amount of time. So I highly recommend it. Be careful though. Be careful, because the way that it generates these unit tests is that it looks at your code and looks at all the paths. So it's doing like a path analysis. Now, if I've got an error in my code already, it's going to assume my code is correct and generate the unit tests accordingly. Right, so let's say, for example, in my code, it says less than 50 fail. Let's assume I was just a bad programmer and I put less than or equal to 50, right? So that would be wrong on the case of 50. And in fact, if we ran this particular test score, it should tell us it's wrong, okay? So let's do that. It should tell us it's wrong. It does, right? Test score is 50, that's a failure. But what happens if I go back to here and ask to unit test the code, right? You'll see, I guess, I haven't tested this yet. Let's see what happens, right? Equals 50. Well, I think I got it the wrong one. And it seems to give us the same test cases, which is fine, because it must be reading the pseudocode, which is good. Let's try it in Chat-GPT. Oops. I like the idea of testing multiple cases in this case. Oops. Let's see what it does here. Here's an updated unit test code. No, it's good. It's good. It's still saying 50 should be a pass, whereas I think our code is saying 50 is a fail. Okay, so that will come up. That's done a good job, because now it's reading it from the pseudocode, which is really quite good. But be careful. That's where it could come unstuck. If we've got an error in our logic, then it's going to create a unit test based on our logic, which of course we could do that as a human as well. But we've got to be careful that we've got to not hit that case. All right, so short story is that this is a really, really good way of testing functions. And I strongly recommend, whenever you create a function, you use this method to create a test for that function, test it out, and that'll give you more confidence to go forward. Make sure you document your function quite well, so there's more information for it to pick up. I'm going to quickly change this here so that I don't forget it for next time. Okay, that's all for this module. So have a look at that, experiment a bit. Let me know in the comments on how you go. That'd be really good feedback. Thanks a lot. See you next time.